In May 1453, a dramatic scene unfolded in the ecclesiastical court of Segoya, where street prostitutes stood before a gathering of bishops and nobles to provide testimony that would shake the foundations of the nobility. Their unusual mission was to affirm that they had engaged in intimate relations with the Prince of Castile, who would later become King Henry IV. This spectacle was not an act of scandalous exposure, rather it was part of the prince's own defense strategy against allegations of impotence. At the same time, another profound human drama played out in the same courtroom. Princess Blanche of Navarre, after 13 years of marriage to one of the most influential monarchs in medieval Europe, was subjected to a humiliating physical examination conducted by matrons of the church. She was compelled to demonstrate that she was still a virgin, despite her long union. The examination revealed that her husband had never consummated their marriage. Not once in over 4,000 nights had he so much as touched her. This was not a trial taking place in some obscure corner of the world. It unfolded in the royal tribunal of Castile, a rising power in medieval Europe, leveraged them as a pivotal aspect of his defense. Henry claimed to be capable of performance with prostitutes, but he insisted that dark forces prevented him from doing so with his wife. He attributed his condition to witchcraft, a curse that afflicted him only when in the marriage bed. In official church records, this condition was termed impotentia ex malicio, or impotence by sorcery. However, what the records fail to capture is the fact that this trial would ignite a series of events leading to a devastating succession war in Castile, ultimately paving the way for Isabella and Ferdinand's ascendance to power and transforming the course of history. To fully grasp how a prince found himself in court with prostitutes defending his virility, we must step back to the year 1436. At that time, the kingdoms of Europe functioned like pieces on a chessboard, with marriage as the ultimate strategic move. Castile and Navarre had been embroiled in a series of bitter border conflicts, prompting the need for a diplomatic solution. The Treaty of Toledo proposed a union between the two realms through marriage. Prince Henry of Castile was set to marry Princess Blanche of Navarre. On paper, this alliance was ideal. Their offspring would inherit both kingdoms, securing peace for the war-torn territories. Yet unforeseen complications arose. On September 16, 1440, amidst the grandeur of the Cathedral of Valladolid, the 15-year-old Prince Henry stood awkwardly at the altar, already displaying signs of the strange ailments that would afflict him throughout his life. Across from him stood 16-year-old Blanche, epitomizing the qualities of a medieval princess. Educated, refined, capable of speaking 4 languages, trained since childhood to ascend to the role of a queen. Cardinal Juan de Cervantes officiated over a ceremony marked by opulence, worthy of the combined nobility of both kingdoms. Blanche's mother, Queen Blanche of Navarre, reveled in the success of her diplomatic endeavor. However, the wedding night would prove to be a disheartening harbinger of what was to come. Medieval royal marriages had their unique and uncomfortable rituals. The consummation of a royal marriage involved a public spectacle of sorts wherein nobles, clergy, physicians, and attendants gathered outside the couple's chambers, some even present within the room itself as witnesses to ensure the marriage was legally binding through physical union. The chamber, filled with expectant witnesses, waited for the customary display of bloodied sheets, signifying that the marriage had been duly fulfilled. Yet as night turned into morning, whispers began to circulate. The prince had failed to perform. Speculations ranged from rumors of stage fright induced by the crowd to the prince's evident disinterest in his bride during the ceremony. In light of this failure, physicians were summoned to examine both parties. Their findings were diplomatically vague, merely stating that the union remained incomplete. Queen Blanchestone attempted to reassure the court, suggesting that such issues were not unusual among young couples, and that time might resolve the dilemma. But her duties called her back to Navarre, leaving her daughter in an increasingly adversarial court environment. Tragically, less than a year later, Queen Blanchestone died under dubious circumstances, potentially poisoned, leaving young Blanche isolated in Castile, wed to a husband who had not touched her. Meanwhile, across the Pyrenees, Blanche's father, John II of Aragon, was already entertaining new ambitions. Given his connections through marriage and politics, his motives could often be ruthless. Having remarried to Hannah Enriquez and fathering a new son, Ferdinand, His political machinations rendered Blanche an increasingly expendable pawn. For the next 12 years, Blanche and Henry inhabited a most peculiar royal marriage. They shared a palace but not a bed, attended state functions together, yet exchanged little meaningful communication. Blanche continued to attend daily mass, fervently praying for a miracle that never came, while Henry spent his nights elsewhere. The court chronicler Alonso de Palencia later remarked on Henry's extreme aversion to Blanche. Yet, for all his abstention from her, Henry was not entirely celibate. His confessor documented the prince's continued engagements with other women, despite ongoing admonishments to attend to his marital duties. The court buzzed with whispers of his nightly escapades and secret rendezvous. By 1445, 5 years into the marriage, desperation drove Henry to pursue increasingly exotic and bizarre treatments for his inadequacy. Physicians from Italy were summoned at great cost, prescribing potions crafted from ground rhinoceros horn, a luxury item requiring illicit transport from Africa. He dutifully consumed these concoctions, but to no avail. Following that, he tried a variety of aphrodisiacs, stocking his court with spices like cinnamon and ginger, as well as a substance termed dragon's blood, actually tree resin masquerading as a miracle cure. These attempts proved futile. As his distress mounted, Henry resorted to increasingly extreme measures that bordered on the macabre. Accounts suggest he applied caustic ointments to his genitals, leading to severe chemical burns that rendered him unable to ride for weeks. In a particularly disturbing episode, sources indicate that he would lie naked on top of Blanche while servants were instructed to whip him until he bled. In the hope that physical pain might provoke sexual arousal, imagine being Princess Blanche during such forge-like experiments. An educated young woman raised in the cultured court of Navarre, now subjected to unimaginable humiliation while painstakingly maintaining the facade of royal dignity. After deliberating for a brief period, the bishop returned with a verdict that aligned with the expectations of those present. By the authority vested in me by Holy Mother Church, Bishop Vasquez de Acuña pronounced, I declare this marriage null and void, having never been consummated due to perpetual impediment caused by maleficium, evil sorcery. But he was not finished. He added that Prince Henry, having validated his natural capabilities through credible testimony, was free to seek another marriage once the proper dispensations were secured from higher ecclesiastical authority. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of reactions. Some nobles erupted into cheers, already contemplating the reconfiguration of marriage alliances, while others sat in stunned silence at the proceedings they had just witnessed. As for Blanche of Navarre, she said nothing. Demonstrating the dignity befitting a woman of her stature, she curtsied to the bishop and quietly exited the cathedral alongside her small retinue. One witness noted that she bore the mantle of her humiliation with a grace that mocked the ordeal, embodying both strength and sorrow as she walked away from a marriage that would forever define her in the annals of history. However, the most remarkable twist in this sordid saga occurred in 1447. When a letter surfaced in the Vatican's secret archives, dating back to March of that year and penned by Blanche herself, in it, she sought not an annulment, but intervention. Most Holy Father, she implored, I fear not for my soul, but for my husband's. There are whispers throughout the court of dark practices and ceremonies conducted at midnight, of pacts made with forces that ought not be named. I beg your holiness to send your most trusted investigators. Blanche was essentially accusing someone of bewitching her marriage. The Pope never responded, or if he did, that response likewise disappeared. Yet mere months after Blanche's distressing letter was sent, the court magician was dismissed, fleeing to Morocco, his quarters searched, sealed, and any items discovered were burned in an exorcism ritual. Was Henry actually cursed? From a contemporary viewpoint, the answer is a resounding no. However, in the 15th century, such explanations were legitimate in the eyes of the law and society at large. This narrative absolved Henry of impotency, preserving the royal line from scandal, while allowing the Church to grant an annulment without setting a perilous precedent for future royal matches. Blanche, meanwhile, would soon find her relevance diminished as political tides shifted. By 1451, Blanche's father, John II, was embroiled in conflict with his own son, Charles, Prince of Vienna, and Castile aligned itself with Charles against John. This shift meant Blanche, once seen as a unifying figure, was now viewed as the daughter of an adversary. In January 1453, just months after Castilian forces officially backed Charles against John II, Henry formally petitioned for an annulment, seeking a means to eliminate his now politically unfeasible marriage. However, such a request necessitated legal grounds. The Church dictated that annulments could only be granted for specific reasons, one being non-consummation, but evidence was required to establish this claim. On May 3, 1453, the ecclesiastical court convened at the Cathedral of Segovia under the watchful eye of Bishop Luis Vasquez, the Acunahand picked for his loyalty to Prince Henry. The gathered nobility, ostensibly present for religious proceedings, were actually there for what was shaping up to be the sensational trial of the century. Blanche entered the courtroom first, 29 years old, and still strikingly beautiful, despite her years of humiliation. Dressed in a simple black gown that reinforced her dignity, standing before the tribunal, she faced a stark question. "Do you swear before God and these witnesses that you remain a virgin and untouched?" To which she solemnly replied, "I so swear," yet swearing alone was insufficient. The court appointed a panel of noble matrons to examine her physically. Blanche was ushered into a side chamber for this contentious examination, the details of which we can only surmise, thankfully. However, we are aware that the matrons confirmed to the court that the Princess of Navarre, after 13 years of marriage, exhibited all physical signs of virginity. When a poignant reflection, one of the matrons would later note in her private writings that Blanche endured the trial with such grace that it moved those present to tears. Next, it was Henry's turn, a move that astounded many. The prince orchestrated a strategy that would present a bizarre defense. He would prove selective impotence. The court witnessed the entrance of prostitutes from Segovia, including 3 notable women whose names we know from court records: Mariela Flores, Catalina de Sandoval, and Beatriz, known as La Portuguesa. These were not random streetwalkers. They were established courtesans who catered to the nobility women acutely aware of the intertwining nature of discretion in politics. Each of these women testified separately, yet their stories aligned with remarkable precision, casting a suspicious shadow over the proceedings. Some observers noted the alleged uncanny consistency of their accounts. Mariela Flores spoke first, vividly recounting her encounters with the prince in a manner that could hardly be misconstrued. Her testimony included specific time, place, and intimate acts that established Henry's capability. She even mentioned a birthmark on his thigh that only someone intimately acquainted with him would know. Catalina de Sandoval took it a step further by producing receipt-sexual documentation from the royal treasury, paying for her services to Henry. The implications were clear. The crown was officially financing the prince's extramarital escapades. However, it was Beatriz La Portuguesa who delivered the most damning testimony, asserting that during one of their encounters, Henry confided that he felt liberated and capable with any woman except his wife, claiming that with Blanche his desires were shackled, as though chained by iron. The prosecution, such as it was in this theater of collusion, framed this evidence as one of supernatural interference. Only sorcery could account for such selective impotence. After a series of testimonies, Bishop Vasquez de Acuña had heard enough. Yet there remained one final witness, a trump card, that Henry had kept hidden. The courtroom doors swung open to reveal Inigo López de Mendoza, the Marquis of Santillana, and a paragon of credibility among the nobility, marked by his unimpeachable reputation. He carried a sealed document and approached the bishop to deliver a testimony that carried grave significance. Authored by Henry's physician, Fernan Pérez de Guzmán. On his deathbed, just 2 weeks post-trial, the physician detailed his medical assessments of the prince over the last decade, concluding that Henry suffered from what he termed mal de adigira, an affliction that translated literally meant the ailment of binding. In layman's terms, he described a psychological impediment to sexual function, but colored with medieval mystique. The doctor even pointed to physical evidence of cursing mysterious scars and discolorations on Henry's abdomen that fluctuated with the lunar phases. Most intriguingly, Pérez de Guzmán recounted an encounter from 1445 involving a nameless woman of Eastern appearance offering a potion to cure Henry's condition. The doctor had refused and alerted the prince, but no action was taken, leading him to suspect that someone else at court might have accepted such an offer. Scholars have endlessly debated the veracity and potential motivations behind the physician's testimony. Was he coerced, bribed, or was he genuinely convinced that Henry was indeed cursed? The truth remains elusive. However, his words in that critical courtroom swayed the balance of authority and credibility. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.